Yeah. Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. Oh, you matter what? Add it up, bankroll, euro, peso, add it up. I'm just doing me, everything is on me. Oh, you matter what? Add it up. Told her if it's all me, everything is on me. Gon' back it up. Matter what? Told ya I'ma do me. Why you hating on me? It's not adding up. I do roll like a Mack truck. Country heart, I might cop a farm and go act up. Lot of scars, I was cold hearted, now I'm back.
Welcome to Primal Rights, Kyle. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me, bro. It's always killer to get the good old SD, you know what I'm saying? Hey, oh, you told me not to swear. Sorry, bro.
Yeah, so why don't you tell the folks at home a little about yourself? Just give a brief introduction so people can find out who you are.
You know me, dog. Just a straight dirt nap dealer. Yeah. Me getting down with the women's. I mean, you just look at me and you know what kind of lifestyle I live. You know what I'm saying, bro? You feel me?
Yeah, that seems to be the prevailing sentiment on social media these days. So the other day you were telling me about your 6.5 Creedmoor reloading efforts. Could you share some of that with our audience?
Heck yeah, bro. I mean, you know how I do with the 6.5 Creed. I mean, come on, everybody knows. Bro, the 6.5 Creed has a greed for speed. You hear what I'm saying to you? I'm spitting these 140s out at like 29.70. Let me get a drink of this real quick. You guys get into this best stuff ever? Yeah, bro. I'm talking about a full case of RL26. You know what I'm saying to you? Everybody knows Reloader 26. Like magic for the 6.5 Creedmoor. Okay? Ready for the 1,000-yard elk shot. Better than anything out there, you know what I'm saying to you? Yeah, bro. Yeah.
That's a lot of velocity out of the 6.5 Creedmoor, the 140. Just out of curiosity, could you tell us how it shoots?
Oh, come on, dog. You know me. Half MOA. All day long when I do my part. You feel me?
So it sounds like you got a crazy amount of experience with the 6.5 Creedmoor, right? We're just a couple of weeks from the end of 2022 here, and I was just wondering if you could tell everyone your total centerfire precision rifle round count for this year.
Yeah, man. So check this out. I haven't shot as much as I want to this year. You know, got this new house I'm trying to get done and paid for, and you know, the queen, she needed a new SUV because the one that she had last year, that, you know, when they're a year old, they're fun more out, you know, everybody know that. She know that, had to get that, got this jet skis and had some work on my boat. Gotta get these two Harleys that I got. Gotta get them paint matched, you know, I can't be rolling around with that kind of trash. And the range, bro, is like at least an hour and a half away. And man, you know, that's just a long way to go. So I ain't going as much as I normally would, but I still got a real respectable round count this year. I'm sitting at probably like 250 rounds, you know, total for the year, which that's still a ton, you feel me? But I got to have room to pursue my life, you know. It ain't just all about shooting for me.
Yeah, well, I've got to run for now, Kyle. I've got some data to compile and a video to produce, but it was great having you on the channel. I'm sure we'll have you back again in the future when we want to get your special and seemingly much more frequently common perspective on things.
Yeah, I'll be back. Peace out, bro.
Well, folks, that was Kyle. Kyle is an acquaintance. He's not a friend. Kyle is not my friend. Kyle is an acquaintance that I seem to be making very frequently these days. It doesn't seem to matter whether I'm talking to someone in person or whether I'm having an interaction on a forum or some social media space like Instagram. I am running into Kyles all over the place. Now, Kyle is someone that we're going to have back on the channel here every once in a while when I need to get the perspective of someone that just doesn't really know much of anything about anything, but yet is seen everywhere, all over the place, with a very loud and boisterous tone, talking as if they are an authority on a subject that they have either no or very limited experience with. Kyles, they seem to all dress the same. They seem to have the same mannerisms. They talk the same. They hang out with other Kyles very regularly. They choose a lot of the same products. And Kyles, generally speaking, they just are not very good or reliable sources of information. So every once in a while, we're going to have Kyle back on the channel, and we're going to ask him what his opinion is. And Kyle's responses are going to be drafted on a real-world, actual interaction that I've had with someone. Now, today we're going to be talking specifically about cartridge velocity. And I really thought it was important for you to get the perspective of Kyle, because what you heard today, a 6.5 Creedmoor with a 140 grain class bullet traveling at a muzzle velocity of 2,970 foot per second. Folks, I didn't make this up, okay? This is an actual response that I got from someone on a forum that specifically was running a 260 Remington and 6.5 Creedmoors, which anybody with half a bit of experience knows that they're basically ballistically equal. And he is running these things at a velocity with a 140 grain class bullet that a 6.5 PRC struggles to get to in some rifles. And he's doing it in a barrel that is 4 inches shorter than the 26-inch test standard. Yeah. So I'm betting that there's a lot of you more reasonable types out there that have encountered a Kyle before. And you know I'm not joking. It's almost as if they're reading from a script. The reason it seems like they all are reading from the same script is because, by and large, they are all getting their information, they're all getting their experience from the same place, the internet. See, Kyle doesn't actually do anything. But what Kyle does do is sit at his job and play on his phone all day long. That's what Kyle actually does. And they all are reading the same thing in the same places from all of the other Kyles that are putting out this ridiculous information. So today we're going to dive into specifically the 6.5 Creedmoor with a 140 grain class bullet, and we're going to do some comparisons between what Kyles are saying on the internet versus what actual load data that's been produced and published by companies such as Hodgdon, or perhaps Hornady or Berger, maybe. And I'll share my own experiences with you as well, and we'll see how it compares to something like what Kyle is running in his rifle. So here's one comment, and this guy says, the more I watch the video, the more confused I am. My 6 Creedmoor 42.5 grain of 4350 produces 3,200%. I mean, first of all, this guy can't even speak. I mean, that's how this guy can't even form a proper sentence or any resemblance to a proper sentence. And he's saying that his load here is 3,200 foot per second out of a 6. This is just one example of the stupidity that I am confronted with literally every single day in various forms of social media, whether it be on YouTube comments, forums, Instagram. It doesn't really make any difference. The thing I'm shining a light on here is the prevalence of borderline insane recommendations for load data and the types of velocities that people are claiming with these various cartridges and the component combinations. Here on the screen you see a screenshot from Gordon's Reloading Tool, or GRT, and this is a predictive software. So essentially you can program in what your cartridge is and the components that you're using and the characteristics of your barrel and whatnot, and it'll output an approximate velocity. And it's useful for other things as well. And I'm not super great at working with this program. I'm actually a little better with quick load, but I know there's a lot of people using this. So I just threw this in here really quick to try to see roundabout where this guy is running and where he's advocating in his 6 Creedmoor. And this is about the closest I can come up with. It's actually worse than this. I know that I'm below on a few of the metrics here in setting up this chart, but you can see that we're talking like 73,500 PSI. Now that is like very much beyond normal operating pressures for a 6 Creedmoor. And like I say, I mean, it was probably closer to 80 or 85,000 PSI if I were to correct and give the proper cartridge configuration and get this tool set up correctly. It would probably give us better numbers, but you do not have to be very experienced in this discipline to know that 3,200 foot per second with a 110 out of a 6 Creedmoor is insane. Here we are looking at what the creator of the 6 Creedmoor has to say about this. And they don't have the 110 grain listed for this particular data, but the 108 ELD-M is here, and that's obviously pretty close. And so you can count on the data being relatively close there to what a 110 would be. And you can see here how the maximum velocity that they have showing in here for max pressure, right, is 3050. So they're showing their absolute maximum charge of what this guy is claiming he's using, which is H4350, at 41.7 grains. Okay, that's, quite a ways under what this guy is claiming. And then he's also claiming that at 42.5, he's seeing 3,200 foot per second, which is 150 foot per second faster than what Hornady is showing for their own cartridge with a 108. Okay, so massive disparity here. And it's not uncommon to have some variance between what you're actually seeing in the world compared to what the reloading data that's produced by all of these entities in the various reloading manuals. It's not uncommon for there to be some differences there. But differences to the tune of 150 foot per second, you just don't see much of that. Moving on from that, here we see the post that kind of got me started on the idea for producing this video. Here's a guy saying that he's been working with his 260, and he describes a 48 grain charge of RL26 with a 142 Sierra Match King. And he is seeing 2965, 2956, 2960, and then 2921. And so he's concerned about a velocity change that seems to occur when he has his suppressor on there. Now, I responded in saying, hey, these velocities are absolutely crazy for a 260, and that more than likely what he's seeing is that his brass is literally giving out under the pressure. It's very widely known that when you're running overpressure, you're going to have lower velocities when you add more powder. And so as he fires, he gets a lower velocity as his rifle is heating up. I've experienced this same thing quite a few different times through the course of testing and finding pressure and seeing how loads behave under high pressure. And so to me, it was very obvious, hey, if you're going to be running those velocities in a 260, literally anything can happen. you can have massive dispersion and variation in your velocities. You can have a full-on detonation and grenading of your action at these velocities. I mean, it is so far beyond what a 260 should be running at that it's not even funny. And then to boot, he's running it in a 22-inch barrel. That's 4 inches shorter. And you can count on, when you're talking about a cartridge like the 260, from 26 inches to 22, you're talking 4 inches and about 25 foot per second per inch, roughly. It's going to vary depending on very specific barrels, your lot number of powder, and your specific bullets. But really, we're talking about roughly 25 foot per second per inch. And so he's running 4 inches shorter. So he's dropping 100 foot per second off of what should be normal as a result of a 22-inch barrel. And folks, the 260 with a 142 should typically be running in a 26-inch barrel at roughly 27.75 or something like that, right? Definitely not 29.65. There is such a huge disparity here that it can't be understated. So not only are we talking about he's advertising 185 foot per second over what I would consider norm for a 260 with that bullet, in a 4-inch shorter barrel, what he's actually saying is that he's seeing 285 foot per second more than what I would consider normal. And this is very easily backed up by the data. But hey, let's not focus on all of that just yet, because it gets even better. When I responded and told him that these velocities were absolutely crazy, this guy doubled down on what he was saying. So he literally said that not only does he have this 260 that he's running at crazy velocities, he's got a 6.5 Creedmoor that is also running at crazy velocities. Now keep in mind here that this 6.5 Creedmoor supposedly has a 26-inch barrel, and so it's not quite as insane as the example that he was proposing with his 260, but it is still absolutely insane to be getting that velocity out of a 140 class bullet in the 6.5 Creedmoor. I don't care what powder you're running, there is no magic pixie dust that's going to make a 6.5 Creedmoor run at these velocities and have it be safe and everything is fine. It is not fine. It is so far from fine, it's not even funny. So again, we go back to Gordon's reloading tool, and again, same caveats apply. I'm just not very good at working with this particular software. But we can see here that when I try to get a 48 grain charge, or RL26, together with a muzzle velocity of 2,970 foot per second, this is about what it shows. We're approaching 70,000 PSI. Now, folks, just to put it in perspective, 80,000 PSI is what is considered by many proof houses to be a proper proof load, meaning that is so far beyond what you should be running at a normal max pressure that it's what they use to test to see if rifles or actions will actually be safe to use at their advertised pressures. Now, advertised pressures, we're talking like 60,000 PSI, roughly. Different cartridges are different, obviously, but we're always going to be somewhere between, say, 45,000 and 60 or 63,000 PSI. And those are in, the higher ends of that are in roughly extreme cases. And we're going to see very erratic results in our tests if we are approaching max pressure for a specific cartridge combination. And so this just shows you just exactly what the prevailing sentiment would be in this particular app if we ran what this guy is claiming to run. And we're clearly beyond max pressure for any metric that this software is working with. Okay, so there's that. But let's get a little more granular with it. because it's one thing for me to, monkey around in this software. I can probably configure it to deliver any result that I wanted. Well, what about more reputable sources? Okay, so here is the Berger published reloading data for their 140 grain Elite Hunter. And you can see here how it has a few different powders listed, and of course, Reloader 26 isn't on the list, but Reloader 17 is. But the key thing here is I want you to look at the max velocities that they're talking about. Maximum velocity in the 2700, roughly the same thing as I was telling you. Now, my own experience with a 140 grain class bullet in a 6.5 Creedmoor, I found my best performing loads at like 2725 to 2750, right in there. Very rarely did I find something that shot its very best. And I'm talking, folks, you know by now that I'm looking for sub-quarter MOA. And I almost never found that in the higher node, which is up there at like 2775 to 2800-ish. I always found the best performance down there at like the 2725, 2750 area. Now, those numbers are very pointed, okay? Now, also, look at the start load velocity. I mean, we're like a long ways away from 2,970 foot per second here, like a long ways. Now, here's what Hornady has to say about their own cartridge, the 6.5 Creedmoor, with a 140 grain bullet. And they're saying a max velocity of 2,700 foot per second. Now, look at, it has a 24-inch test barrel that they're showing there. And obviously, as we previously established, 25 foot per second per inch. So if they were running a 26-inch barrel, they'd probably be very close to the 2750 that I was telling you guys about earlier. So there's what Hornady says about their own cartridge. So here's some more data from Hodgdon. And obviously the powder manufacturers typically have a little bit more lawyered up data set. And so they're generally going to shoot on the low end by quite a ways. And so we can see here their maximum load being 40 grains of H4350 is producing a velocity of 2660. And again, they're using a 24-inch barrel. And we see a pressure there of roughly 60,000 psi. So here we have Hodgdon, a powder manufacturer, saying that, hey, they pretty much agree with where a 140 should be run in a 6.5 Creedmoor. They pretty much agree with Hornady and Berger. So what about Alliant? Obviously, the purveyor of the reloader powders must have data that corroborates this, right? No, actually, they show Reloader 16 being the desirable powder for use rather than Reloader 26. I mean, that's not altogether uncommon. But there's never going to be a gigantic velocity disparity, even if you're switching within one maker's powder, that's going to just magically transform a 6.5 Creedmoor into a 6.5 PRC. So here they're showing a velocity of 2823. And it is a little higher. But you know what is, I find this very strange. No one is talking about the bore condition or the fouling or the creation of a carbon ring or the fouling of your suppressor or other effects that come along with your powder choice. Because you don't get to just choose one powder over another and not have any concept of whether or not it's going to allow for long strings of fire or be stable in various temperatures or allow for a very large number of rounds to be fired between cleanings without your point of impact shifting.
Like H4350.
I mean, those are all things that people think about when they're selecting powders, right? No, actually, all anyone wants to talk about is velocity. And so it doesn't surprise me that the reloader powders are showing a little bit more velocity. But you notice how the data here on Alliance website does not show pressure? Maybe somebody should ask why that is. Let's jump across the pond for a second. Let's see what Vidivori thinks. So here's their data from the Vidivori website on the 6.5 Creedmoor with a Berger Hybrid 140. So the maximum that they show with any of their powders, which is N560, and they're reporting a maximum velocity of 2,746 feet per second. There's quite a disparity there between what some random inexperienced guy on the internet thinks compared to what all of the sources of components for reloading data think. Pretty amazing, isn't it? Oddly enough, the data that they're showing lines up with my experience. I have done load workups in a pile of 6.5 Creedmoors. I can't even remember how many. And 140 grain class bullet, whether it be a 142 Match King or a 140 Elite Hunter or 140 Hybrid or 139 CNAR. I mean, they're very popular bullet weight class in the 140s. And so I've done who knows how many workups with that combination and a ton of different powders. Never even once in my entire career have I seen 2,970 foot per second. And that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about just how frequently I get phone calls from people, and they're super frustrated because they're not able to achieve anywhere near the velocities that people are telling them on the internet. They'll go and they'll post something on their social media, or they'll post a question in a forum, and the answers that they get from people are oftentimes extraordinarily fast. Meaning, no matter what cartridge people are asking about, no matter what combination of components, the recommendations that they get for load data and the associated velocities that those people are reporting are bordering on insane in many cases. Now, the reason for this is pretty widely known, in my opinion. People just don't shoot that much. I don't think you out there, my audience, realize just how little people actually shoot. We're going to have a video coming up here very soon in the coming weeks that is going to surprise and shock many of you at just how little people actually shoot, with the very rare exception of maybe 0.5% of the precision rifle community that is shooting a ton. But this data is being produced by people that found the data in the same way that the guy that's asking about it right now found it. Meaning they just went and looked on the internet and saw what other people were doing and started doing that. There's no actual effort put into it by the vast majority of shooters, because that would take a long time, a lot of components, a lot of different powders, a lot of different components that they just aren't willing to invest. And then too, there's this thing where most people just don't have ready access to be able to shoot whenever they want. They can't do what I can do here. I can just load around over here on the bench. I can slide over and just fire it right out of my office. Most people cannot do that. And so I'm extraordinarily blessed to be able to do that. And we're doing things that are going to make that even easier and even better. But most people are not going to have that kind of facility. Most people have to drive to a range. That means they got to load everything that they're going to test in advance and go and shoot it all in one session. This is extraordinarily limiting. I don't know how. Point in fact, I can vehemently state there is no way that I could have got the amount of experience that I have if I had to do that. I would never have been able to do as much work fire as many rounds in as short a time as I have been without the ability to shoot right where I reload. So this fact alone prohibits the abundance of super good and reliable reloading data being shared amongst the general shooting populace. I've only shared a couple of instances because, I mean, let's face it, I could make a video that was 100 hours long, and I could show a little snippet or a screenshot of a post that someone has made that's recommending a extremely hazardous load in whatever cartridge and whatever combination of components. Folks, this stuff is just so prevalent anymore that it staggers the imagination of just how much of it is out there. Obviously, something had to prompt this video, and the constant bombardment that I have received for the last minimum 10 years of my career, and it's getting worse day by day. It's not getting better. People aren't wising up and demanding more experience before they start sharing load data. No, it's actually the opposite. It's getting worse. That's how people get it in their heads that they can have a lesser cartridge be on equal footing to a much more capable cartridge. They just keep stacking powder into the case, thinking that that's perfectly fine. It is not fine. And the kinds of loads that these people are talking about, it's just a matter of time before it happens. Everything will be fine until it's not fine. And when it's not fine, it goes very bad in a fraction of a second. You have no time to react. You just set off a grenade right next to your face. And if you have never seen a picture of what someone looks like after that happens, you probably want to go look that up. Because this is nothing to trifle with. This is not a trivial thing that I'm talking about. This isn't a populist video designed to get clicks and views. This is a video designed to wake you up. I've routinely demonstrated feats of accuracy and precision on this channel, and those have all shown up where I'm running a relatively lazy load. It's the low node, right? It's not as fast and as much performance in terms of velocity as I can get out of that cartridge. It's actually relatively low and slow compared to what maximum I could go to. The consistency that you can wring out of your process and your equipment and your components is the singular most critical aspect in whether or not you're going to be able to impose your will on a distant target whenever you feel like it, okay? The consistency is the most important factor. 50, 100 foot per second really doesn't matter. Now, let me show you exactly what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's take a look at this here. We're going to go into a 6.5 Creedmoor, and I've got a 140 grain Burger VLD in here. And as you can see here, it's got a muzzle velocity of 2,750 foot per second. And let's just do a 1,000-yard shot. And so in this particular condition, which we're dealing with, here's roughly 50% humidity, 50 degrees, 27.4 station pressure, and 10 mile an hour, 9 o'clock, so full value 10 mile an hour wind. And we're looking at 8.5 mils of elevation and 2 mils of wind. Okay, so let's go and change the velocity on this guy. Okay, let's, instead of 2750, let's go 2850. So let's add 100 foot per second to this thing. And take a look. 7.8 now is what we've got for our elevation. But look at the wind. The primary factor on whether or not you're going to hit is your ability to run the wind. Elevation is relatively a constant. We're going to be dialing it, we're going to be holding it. It doesn't really matter. Did we pick up much of anything at all here? Now, just for the sake of argument, let's take a look at what a 6.5 PRC would do, because we can hit like 2950 pretty easily. You know, 2900 for sure, but I mean 2950-ish is about where I find good loads pretty commonly with the 6.5 PRC with a 140. And so let's just take a look at that. 0.2 of a mil. We have to go all the way. Look at how much velocity we stacked on here. Okay? And we only picked up 0.2 of a mil. We picked up a bit more in terms of our elevation. So if you want a large difference in performance, you can't just stack powder in the case, folks. You need to go to an entirely different cartridge. Now, what does that look like? Let's take a look at the 7 Norma Mag Improved that I shoot with a Berger 195 EOL at 3100 foot per second. The same conditions at 1,000 yards, and look at this massive disparity in performance. We're talking elevation is calling for 5.7 mils, and we're calling for 1.3 mils of wind in that same 10 mile an hour full value wind. So if you want more performance, that's how you get it. You go to a different cartridge with entirely different capabilities, and this is not something that's up for debate. You cannot take a cartridge that's designed to operate in a certain pressure with a certain type of component and just stack 20 or 30,000 psi more in there and think that it's going to work out. I hope this has been illuminating and educational for you guys. Do not listen to Kyle, whom you met at the beginning of this episode. Instead, follow vetted sources of information. Most of the reloading component manufacturers out there have a relatively decent starting load data set that you can use in your own development processes. We have all kinds of resources on this channel, as well as in the library and articles section of the Primal Rights website, that can help you safely pursue this discipline and safely create your own wonderful hand loads without trying to blow yourself up or hurt other people that are around you. So I encourage you to find those proper vetted sources and approach the data, quote unquote, that you get on the internet with extreme caution.